Heather, on the mainstream media and also on some of my interactions on campus, some students are saying, Charlie, crime is down. Crime is down. The FBI says crime is down. Let's play cut 74 to kind of set the table here. Let's play cut 74.
Violent crime is actually down across the U.S. New statistics from the FBI show an estimated 3% drop last year. Let's talk about this with CNN's chief law enforcement and intelligence analyst, John Miller. All right, John, walk us through these numbers.
Well, what we're seeing is a couple of numbers of significance. So first, going to the overall numbers, and we can look at that graphic. You've got violent crime overall, that's shootings, manslaughter, murder, down 3%. So that's a good story on a day when we're hearing bad news out of places like Birmingham. Property crime overall, down 2.4%. So that is from 2022 to 2023.
Okay, Heather, what's the truth here?
The truth is he's using the wrong benchmark. When Americans feel like crime is up, when they see the anarchy, when they see the disorder, they are not wrong, Charlie. If you are living in a city, there's a distinction in this country between suburban crime and urban crime. You've seen a 40% increase since the George Floyd race riots. We have seen the largest one-year increase in homicides in this country in 2020, up 29%. The trivial decreases last year do not begin to erase the crime anarchy that has broken out since George Floyd and since Biden and Harris legitimated that riots and started the whole attack on the police as racist.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. This is Blake. And how extreme can you put into context? I think a lot of people had the sense that, obviously 2020 was a very dangerous year with a lot of mayhem. How much did crime go up in 2020, 2021? And by comparison, how much has the decline been since then?
In 2020, homicides rose 29%. That is the largest increase in homicide in this nation's history, and it's frankly a statistical increase that in any field is almost unheard of. Last year, the FBI is showing that homicides went down 11% nationally. That doesn't begin to decrease the homicide shootings, the insane drive-by shootings that have broken out in urban areas. And we're still living with the consequences today. We're living with it with property crime. We all know the shoplifting. We all know the insanity of having major, just trivial household items locked under key. We have capitulated to the forces of anarchy. Government is not protecting us. It's not protecting property, and it's not protecting lives.
Yeah, and even going bigger picture than that, so crime went up in 2020, but I've also seen it stated crime's kind of also up from about, I think 2014, we got the first wave of BLM with the with the Ferguson stuff, Michael Brown. Mm-hmm. And so that's when you saw, murders went way up in Baltimore, in other cities. And so the long-term trend is definitely one of much higher crime almost entirely within our cities.
Absolutely. And again, this is a trend that is man-made. It is a result of law enforcement backing off from its lawful powers. It's a result of the demoralization of cops. It's the result of progressive prosecutors who have decided they would rather not enforce the law than put Black criminals in jail. And these policies were embraced by the Biden administration. Biden took every opportunity to say that Black parents are right to fear that their kids are going to be killed by a cop every time they step outside. Kamala Harris, after the George Floyd incident, also said we have a systemic racism problem in this country, including in law enforcement. These problems are not going to go away unless we change the governing philosophy with regards to law enforcement. The police have nothing to apologize for, Blake. They're the most restrained force in history at this point. And if you want to talk about who should fear going outside, as usual, the rates of interracial violent crime are just the opposite of what the media tells you. When you look at all violent crime between Blacks and whites and Blacks, excluding homicide, because this is self-reported, blacks commit 76% of all violent crime between blacks and whites and blacks. That makes blacks 16 times more likely to violently attack a white person than vice versa. And yet the narrative is it's white supremacy is the problem. Lies, lies, and lies.
Yeah, and so Heather, the agenda seems to be a war on white people, a war on kind of the people that are in the homeland. And I'm just not white people aren't the only ones in the homeland. Black Americans are Hispanic Americans, but it seems that a through line is a oligarchy or a ruling class that has contempt for the people that are here, for a preference for those that are not here. And if there's any part of the population that seems to be criticized, smeared, and slandered, it is white male Americans. Why is that? What is behind that, Heather?
Hatred, but then it's an infinite regress. What explains that hatred? Resentment, and a hatred of bourgeois values. The government has decided that its primary obligation at this point is to the dysfunctional and antisocial, hardworking, law-abiding, tax-paying Americans are treated like ATM cash machines simply to fund these ineffective social programs and welfare transfers. It's the great inversion. Government's primary responsibility is to the law-abiding and the hardworking. But all the homeless policy, all the immigration policy, it is absurd that we are erasing the distinction between legal and illegal and citizen and non-citizen. But government has decided that it somehow has to atone for what is by now purely imaginary flaws on the part of a white male civilization. Yes, America was extremely racist. It was violating its founding ideals every single day for much of its history. We are not that country today. And every time that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden insist that we still are, Biden says we have this enduring stain of racism in our soul. They are asking for more anarchy, for more hatred, for more racial division, none of which needs to exist today or should exist.
And what it does, Heather, about 20 seconds here, about a minute remaining, and so just take the time on this you can. It disallows us from actually having policy that might be best for the country if everything is racist behind it. So, for example, you can't have shoplifting regulations in certain convenience stores because they say, well, you might be racially profiling because, I don't know what the number is, Blake, XYZ in urban areas, shoplifting is done by young black men. Heather, you would know the statistics, but it's probably upwards of 50%, right?
Yeah.
And so it makes the country worse, doesn't it? It doesn't allow us to enforce laws, customs, or regulations that would improve the safety because, well, we don't want to be racist.
Charlie, you're absolutely right. Race drives everything in the criminal justice system today. If your listeners sort of are scratching their heads looking around what's going on with these progressive prosecutors that are announcing they're not going to enforce a whole basket of laws, it's all because of race. It's all because if law enforcement does enforce the law in a colorblind, neutral way, it will have a disparate impact on black criminals, not because the law is racist. It is not. It is because the black crime rate is so high. The solution to that is not to emasculate policing, not to stop enforcing the law. It's to bring the family back together. That's a long-term proposition. In the short term, if you want to save black lives, and we shall never accept the fiction that the Black Lives Matter activists actually want to save black lives. They don't give a damn about black lives. They have never once protested a black victim of a black criminal. But if you do want to save those lives, you need the police and you need law enforcement.
Of course.